how hopeful are you on the next steps, suggestions that there may be a 21-day ceasefire?
Look, first of all, I am very, very glad that the Prime Minister led efforts within the United Nations to call for an immediate ceasefire in Lebanon, just as the government has been calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. And it's also great to hear that there's now a coordinated response within the United Nations Security Council by the US, by the EU. I know that France also called for a special United Nations Security Council meeting as well. So it seems that within the United Nations that there is consensus. It is now up to Israel and Hezbollah as to what they will do. We will find out very soon about the Israeli position because Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will be making his address, and then
to the UN General Assembly.
That's right, and then we will be hoping that Hezbollah also accepts that. But I think that's what's desperately needed because of the devastation that has been wrought. Within the last week, more than 500 people have lost their lives, more than 50 children have been killed, and I know that the UK government, has also condemned the killing of 2 UNHCR aid workers. So there is a lot to achieve, but it can only be achieved collectively.
How worried are you about Brits in Lebanon? We've been chatting to some at the airport, Beirut, saying it's nearly impossible to get a flight.
Look, I know commercial airlines were operating, and in fact, I was due to address a meeting, a defence meeting at the Labour Party conference in Liverpool, where Defence Secretary John Healey and I were both supposed to be there, but unfortunately, the Defence Secretary had to leave early in order to chair preparations for a potential evacuation of British nationals.
That was the Cobra meeting, yeah.
Precisely, and then that's in the absence, obviously, of the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary, who have flown to New York for the UN General Assembly. But 700 troops have also been sent to a base which I recently had the pleasure of visiting, RAF Akrotiri. So our brave servicemen and women are there, and that is also okay because I'm glad that the government has also learned from the previous devastating debacle in Afghanistan when we weren't able to effectively withdraw British nationals and others.
So are we preparing for that Dunkirk-style sea lift, as we've heard about?
Look, at the moment, we're hopeful that there will be a 21-day immediate ceasefire, assuming that both parties can agree to that. However, there have been previous false dawns. There was also a lot of expectation, especially in the US and in the UK, that there would be a ceasefire in Gaza. Unfortunately, that has not transpired. So we desperately want de-escalation of the violence, and we cannot afford for the conflict.
I understand
to
that, but my question was, as the chairman of the Defence Select Committee, is it your understanding that we can bring Brits out by sea if we need to?
Look, I'm grateful to the Defence Secretary who called me last night, and we had a long 10-15-minute discussion. He updated me about efforts. So if required, preparations are in place for that. However, it is hoped that it will not come to that, but at least the preparations are in place.
So if necessary, we can get Brits out?
Precisely. I think that's
the most important thing.
What's being put in place.
OK, let me talk about your boss, because it's a story that is not going away. You've heard the latest news about £20,000 worth of accommodation during the election campaign. He says that it was so his son could study in peace. He stayed on, the Prime Minister, for at least a month afterwards. Is that acceptable?
Look, initially, when I was on my way back down south from Liverpool, when I read the headline that £20,000 for the Prime Minister's son's accommodation, I thought, oh my God, here we go again after the recent furore regarding gifts. But when I actually read in detail various reports on it, and when I heard the Prime Minister's explanation, the human factor, I thought, come on, we've got to do better than this. I'm sure that whether it's Sky News, yourselves, we can do a lot better than this, because the headline should have been that man fearing for the safety of his family, and in the hope that his son, in particular, who's sitting his GCSE exams, can have that safety and well-being. Well, that he finds the place of his friend's flat as a temporary accommodation. So I think that
OK, it's not, let's take this a little step further, if I may. He subsequently stayed on for another month after the GCSE season had stayed. He was there to listen to the exit poll be released. He was there when he said, you all need to stay at home, and he wasn't in his own home. He was there suggesting that when the Queen had died, that it was his own home, with pictures behind him of his family. It wasn't his own home. The same bloke got a free pass, access all areas to Downing Street.
OK, I think, the Prime Minister has stated...
Does that really pass the sniff test for you?
Well, look, for me, the key thing around the accommodation, with the issue that you raised, I think for there, it is a fact that outside the Prime Minister's home, at that point in time, there were people camped out, whether it's
Are you ignoring the rest of the stuff I said?
No, look, I'm not ignoring that. I'm just answering that question first, because I think it's important.
We've already done that question. We've moved on to other times he didn't need to be there, but nevertheless he was still there and suggested he was at home.
Look, I'm not au fait with all the details of various previous examples, but in terms of the accommodation aspect, I think we do need to bear in mind that the leader of the opposition, as he was then, and if, according to projections, he would be the future Prime Minister, his home was constantly being deluged by whether it's protesters, whether it's journalists, investigators.
What about once the GCSEs had finished?
So, I think that's something that I think the Prime Minister and others no doubt will answer.
What about suggesting he was at home during lockdown restrictions when he wasn't? He was in somebody else's home.
What I understand from that is that, as the Prime Minister said, that nothing untoward, nothing illegal happened. All the rules were followed.
He was pulling the wool over our eyes.
I will take him at his word. I think he's a man of integrity, and if that's what he stated...
pictures of his kids behind him.
Pictures of his kids? Well,
seriously, that would suggest that he was in his own home, wouldn't it?
Well, look...
what would it suggest to you if you had pictures of the kids behind when you were doing a chat?
Kate, whenever you're doing a video or you're doing... There is also, whether it's the flag behind, whether it's...
That's a bit different. We all own the flag. We don't all own his kids.
Yeah, well, look, whether it's creating the right environment, that obviously will be individuals who are in charge of whether it's the setup, whether it's cameras, etc. But ultimately, I think we need to be very, very careful here. When we start putting out headlines like, £20,000 taken for accommodation and so on, look, nothing illegal has happened, first of all, and no cash has exchanged hands.
Nobody
as the
said
Prime Minister, I think that's what the headline implied. But we also...
So what does it imply when he's got pictures of his kids behind him?
Well, look,
it implies that he's at home, and he wasn't.
I think often when somebody, when they're doing a Zoom meeting, sometimes I might have some books behind me. It doesn't mean that I'm sitting in a library. It just means that you just want a better background.
I can buy those same books, but I wouldn't use pictures of somebody else's kids behind me if I was trying to do a video, would I? Come on.
I think, look, I don't think those sort of decisions are taken by the Prime Minister or the Minister of the day. I think that is something which is, in terms of preparation.
If he hadn't wanted that picture there, he would have said, I don't want pictures of my kids behind me in this shot, because he's very protective of his children. He made a conscious decision for that to happen.
Well, look, I think ultimately...
Implying it was his home.
I think that rather than trying to bring his kids in, rather than trying to do other things, I think what we need to bear in mind is that the public will begin
We didn't bring his children into it. He did.
I think when you had the headlines of like £20,000 accommodation, etc., I think that's where we're... And what is really, really disheartening to see, especially on social media, is people are trying to compare the conduct of this Prime Minister with a previous Prime Minister. Let us not forget when it was Boris Johnson...
Oh, here we go. Yeah. No, perception is reality. Let's talk about this Prime Minister. Perception is reality. Why on earth did he give a pass to somebody who'd given him 55 grand's worth of freebies? Why did he give him an access all areas pass to Downing Street?
Look, Lord Ali, as I understand it, has been not just a Labour peer, but also a major Labour donor, a member for decades. And he obviously is a close friend of the Prime Minister for several years. In terms of his attendance at various meetings...
It's a place of work, Downing Street.
And
it's not about his mates going around.
And I also understand that was on a temporary basis, and that thereafter it was removed. So
what was it for?
Well, according to reports, as I think Sky News itself has reported, it was to attend various meetings.
What sort of meetings?
So, Well, I'm not privy to that. Kay, this is way above my pay grade. I mean, little old me, I think, I've been to Downing Street, or number 11 Downing Street recently, but that was merely to meet the Chancellor. That was as a meeting for us MPs. So while I'm not privy to those meetings, I think ultimately we must recognise that nothing untoward has happened with regards to this. Where the issue around clothes, I think it was good that that scrutiny was there, and then the government, having listened to whether it was yourselves, whether it was us as MPs, they actually took the decision and then made the change. And that it has also been stated that in terms of future policy for government ministers, that they will not be accepting whether it's gifts of clothes, etc.
Yeah.
But ultimately,
you've also taken 300 quid off pensioners.
Look, in terms of pensioners, I think, as has been stated, that we need to balance the books. I think one of the reasons why the Labour Party actually won the election was in terms of two key things. Firstly, regaining economic credibility, that the public trusted us with the public finances.
And there we have it. It's all about trust.
It was stated that we will bring down our national debt, we will balance the books, and secondly, we are now again trusted on defence and national security. So when a £22 billion budgetary
10 billion of that was your
black
problem.
hole was found.
That was because you did public sector pay increases. Well, it was 12 billion before you did that.
That is something that the Tories never actually factored in.
That was a problem of your own making.
And we did. Okay,
I'm getting in trouble. I have to call it a day. I'm sorry, but we can have this debate all afternoon.
That was on the back of independent pay review bodies. And look, we need to make sure that it's not just enough to clap our nurses and doctors and rail workers who worked through a pandemic when most of us were scared to even venture out. Yeah. So we need to make sure that they have a decent wage
again now. Let's
for working
see
people.
Whether you're a hostage to fortune. It's good to see you. Thank you very much.